All right, everyone, welcome back into another live edition of the Patriots Beat Podcast here on the CLNS Media Network. It is Brian Hines back with Alex Barth. Today, his voice has returned, so he is back to talk some football. A lot's happened since we've last talked to you, Barth, here, because
Yes, I picked quite the week to not be able to do any shows.
to
So,
lose your voice. I know,
y-
because
y-
this coaching search is still going on here, and we have a long, extensive list of offensive coordinator candidates. Looks like we're pretty close to confirming a defensive coordinator candidate, and we have some action on special teams. So let's start with the coaching staff, and then a lot of this show is going to be previewing the
yeah,
Senior Bowl that kicks off tomorrow and goes throughout this week. We'll finally get some draft talk and talk about some of these prospects, but we will begin with the coaching staff because this offensive coordinator search is exhaustive and it's long and it's 11 coordinators and candidates deep now. Obviously, some of those guys have signed. Zach Robinson went to Atlanta over the weekend, Dan Pitcher, Shane Waldron.
right.
But they're going through all these names. It's a lot of guys from this Sean McVay, Kyle Shanahan coaching tree, and it's a lot of guys who are tight ends coaches, which you see a lot because they have their say in the passing game and the running game. Like Nick Caley, who's coming in, he's in town right now, actually, I think, for an in-person second interview. So a lot of names and a lot of kind of similarities between these candidates that they're bringing in.
Yeah, it clearly have a type, right? They're looking for a younger guy. No, they're okay if they haven't called plays before, and they want somebody with an experience in that West Coast offense. And maybe it does end up being a Caley after all this, but they're certainly doing their due diligence. And I'd remind everybody too that often these interviews double as both coordinator interviews and, positional coach interviews. So you look at a guy, you mentioned all the tight ends coaches they've interviewed, or is this maybe a guy that's going to come in on Nick Caley's staff, on whoever's staff in a positional role? I just want to pull up the list here because you can't keep it off the top of the head. It's so
Way too many names.
freaking expansive, right? It's we're up to, are we still at 11?
Yes.
I forgot to check after I just got home. All right, so we're still at 11 here. The majority of them, are ties to the Niners, ties to the Rams, or guys with second degree ties like Gerard Johnson is working in Houston, but he worked under Bobby Slowick, who was with the Niners, right? Somebody like that. There's a couple outliers. Scott Turner's an interesting one, the son of Norv Turner, who was with the Raiders, and he's kind of bounced around. Tanner Engstrand's another one. He's with Detroit, which runs a very different offense. That is much more of a it's not quite the Patriots offense, the old Josh McDaniels offense, but there's much more elements of that in it than there is elements of that West Coast Shanahan thing. So they're looking around. But I think we know what they want. I'm not worried by the overwhelming number of interviews. 2 weeks ago, people were upset. Well, even if you knew you were going to hire Gerard Mayo, why didn't you talk to anybody else? Why not just see? Why not just ask? See what's out there. So, nothing's good enough apparently at this point, but they'll get their hire. Somebody's going to take the job. I think Nick Caley is, worst case scenario right now, it feels like they end up with Nick Caley. And that's not a bad worst case scenario, especially when you consider what this team has looked like at the offensive coordinator position the last couple of years. So me personally, I mentioned Engstrand. I really like him. I think he's an interesting candidate. I think Clint Kubiak, the 49ers pass game coordinator, is an interesting candidate. I've talked quite a bit. I really like Gerard Johnson, but now it looks like maybe Bobby Slowick's not going to end up a head coach, in which case we'll see what happens there. But maybe Johnson stays on his staff, waits it out so he can succeed Johnson as the OC in Houston and get to work with CJ Stroud. But yeah, there's a lot of options. They seem to be trending in the right direction. One name they haven't interviewed, and I guess this might just be a formality at this point, is Josh McDaniels too. So it doesn't seem like they're going totally to fall back on that. The one thing I'd say on that topic, and I know I'm going in a million directions right now, again, I haven't done a show in a week, is I like Nick Caley because he has the experience in LA. And it's not a ton, but it's something. And he may be able to, you're not going to get the full McVay experience. You don't get that without McVay. You can hire whoever you want. You could have hired Zach Robinson. You're not going to get that without McVay. He may be able to marry some of those McVay concepts into the Patriots' traditional offense. But if they're going to bring Nick Caley back just to have him run Josh McDaniels' offense, well, then just bring back Josh McDaniels at that point. Bring back the guy whose offense it is. Don't do it secondhand. We talked about this a lot with the positional coaches at the end of the season, Brian, that it felt like they were putting coaches in boxes, and instead of saying, we hired you because we feel like we trust your system and your instincts and your football knowledge, they were kind of saying to coaches, we brought you in here to run this. We brought you in here because we don't want you to run your system. We think you can run this system. If the Josh McDaniels offense is what it is, then get Josh McDaniels. It's his system. If you want to try to go West Coast, then yeah, Nick Caley makes a ton of sense. Don't bring in Nick Caley to run Josh McDaniels' offense. I know a lot of people don't want Josh McDaniels. I don't think he's as bad as a lot of people would seem. I wouldn't hate them taking a step towards that West Coast offense. But if the Josh McDaniels offense is the choice, then it should be Josh McDaniels. It should not be somebody mimicking him.
Yep. Agree with you there. I don't really see the path to Josh here, just because it would go against, like, you have 11 interviews and one kind of offense, and then you're just going to like pivot to Josh and run this other offense. It's just kind of weird. And Jason,
well, maybe nobody sold them. Maybe they've been in interviews and they're like, we still haven't heard what we want to hear.
And Jason brings up a point like coaching still matters. Do you think just bringing in a veteran coach could help an inexperienced staff? That's where maybe Josh should come in as this advisor, especially if it's someone like Nick Caley or Scott Turner, because he worked with Josh in Vegas last year, kind of running that similar offense. But I mean, if you're going like full McVay, like, I don't know if you want to have Josh in there as like a senior advisor, because it's kind of a different offense, but maybe just working with the quarterbacks would be helpful for him there.
I still think having some sort of experienced head coach on the staff, I was kind of hoping it would be as the offensive coordinator, maybe a guy like Frank Reich. I still think having some sort of football advisor, like real football advisor, would make a ton of sense. I look at Mike Vrabel. He should be back in the conversation. And Seattle makes a ton of sense for him. And he makes a ton of sense for Seattle. And maybe that's where he ends up. He's not going to Washington. I think that they're going to announce Ben Johnson any minute now. If Vrabel doesn't go to Seattle, I think they need to figure out some way, shape, or form to get him in the building and allow him to be a resource for Gerard Mayo.
Yep. Yeah, we talked a lot about that, like football operations guy who can just come in and kind of oversee everything. That would be a really good fit for Mayo there. Going through some of the names, because there were so many, we didn't even hit on all of them there. Thomas Brown, who was another guy who was kind of born and raised in Sean McVay. He coached running backs, tight ends. He was the Panthers offensive coordinator last year. Brian Fleury, who's worked with Shanahan the last 4 or 5 years. He's been the tight ends coach there. Luke Getsy. He was probably the one that came in that I was like, I'm not a huge fan of Luke Getsy.
Yeah.
It didn't go great with Chicago and Justin Fields the last 2 years, and he was let go. And then, Clint Kubiak and Scott Turner were the two this morning that came in. So it's a lot of names. We're 11 names deep here, and maybe you think it's going to come to a close this week, maybe later in this week as they start to get into these second in-person interviews. But just a lot of names going on here.
Yeah, I think by the end of the week, we'll probably know. Yeah. At that point, I see some people talking about what's taking so long. They're behind. They're fine. They're fine right now. Anybody who thinks that these candidates aren't paying attention to the guys in the draft and aren't paying it, like they know they're going to end up with the job, right? Frankly, they're not staying prepared at this point. It's not the guy I hire. After this week is when I'd be like, okay, this is going on a little bit, unless they're waiting for one of those Niners guys, I guess. And maybe it's just not announced, but if they don't have it by the end of the week and it's not a Niner, it doesn't ultimately end up being a Niners hire, whatever. Now, I'll also wait 2 weeks to get somebody from that 49ers offense. I have no problem with that, to get a guy like Clint Kubiak. But I don't think that they're not like that delayed yet. It's really not a problem.
Yep. Agree with you there. But one thing that does look like it's not confirmed official yet, but it's pretty much right there, 99%, is the defensive coordinator spot, which is going to DeMarcus Covington. Obviously, it was, I think, at top of all of our list at the end of the year when we knew it was going to be Mayo. He's a young coach. He's a fast riser. He's taken DC interviews last year. He's worked at the Shrine Bowl defensive coordinator. Got a lot of praise for his work down there on and off the field, even like in the classroom, leading these guys and just keeping that continuity in that defense. That again, it was good last year, and having a guy that's familiar with Gerard Mayo is big to keep around. So we all kind of thought that was a no-brainer if he was willing to stay, and it looks like he is, and that defensive coordinator spot is for him.
Yeah, good hire. Now we see who else they interviewed ends up on the staff. Michael Hodges to me makes a ton of sense as the linebackers coach. And then what happens with Steve? They reportedly extended an offer for Steve Belichick to come back. It doesn't sound like Bill Belichick's going to be coaching anywhere. Does Steve come back as some sort of advisor or something to watch?
Yep. And like Christian Parker they interviewed him. He's another guy to watch in that secondary, maybe a secondary coach. I hope they're able.
I like Christian Parker. Yeah.
Yeah. I hope they're able to keep Mike Pellegrino around because he's done a great job with those corners. But we'll see with him. And then Steve and Brian are the kind of big one. But would you assume that Covington, even if Steve comes back, Covington will be the play caller for that defense?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yep. So that one looks like it's going to be confirmed here. That one made a lot of sense to just keep him around and promote from within. And then, as you said, Hodges and Parker could be good fits just as positional coaches on that staff. And we had some special teams movement too in the coaching staff because they lost Joe Houston, who was one of the assistants the last few years. He went to Florida. I don't think they gave him an official title, but he bounces out of here. They lose another coach.
Well, Florida didn't have a special teams coach last year at all. And I'm wondering how that worked, but I would guess he's going to be a special teams coordinator, some sort of equivalent.
So losing another coach there. And I think Andrew Callahan had it that Cam Acord coached last year in a contract year. So his contract is reportedly up too. Yeah. So we expected some movement on special teams too because they were interviewing these guys for coordinator jobs. Jeremy Springer flew in this past weekend, probably with Nick Caley to interview because Marquise Williams declined the job. He's staying with Atlanta. So, I mean, you'd expected some movement on that side of the football, especially because the performance the last few years haven't been great. But looks like one coach is out, and Acord, if he doesn't have a contract, it's kind of tough to see that one being re-upped or re-signed there.
Yeah, it's good. I think it's going to be a whole new group.
Agree with you there, but I think we hit all the names. There's a lot to keep track of, but any other coaching news or anything else that caught your attention from that search?
I'll just pull this up, this comment, and there's a comment before it about the scheme. Not having an offensive scheme without a coach, and it says the Patriots have a famously small scouting staff. Now they're even shorter, which isn't true. And the Shrine Bowl is this week, and the Senior Bowl's this week. How's it not a problem? So look, it's a fair question. I would say one, again, like we just talked about, look at who they're talking to. It's all McVay Shanahan guys. I think they have an idea of the general scheme. And maybe there's little nuances here or there, but you're not doing that kind of scouting at this point. The other thing is when you're at the Senior Bowl or the Shrine Bowl, you're not scouting individual. You are scouting individual players, but you're looking at the whole group. Like you're there to figure out who has a good work ethic, who has a good motor, you scout every player. You talk to every player. If you're doing it right, you scout every player, you talk to every player. The scheme part doesn't come in here. The scheme part comes in after the Senior Bowl, the Shrine Bowl, after the Combine, when you start narrowing down your board, when you start cutting down to your board to the guys you have draftable grades on. The scout should be operating as is, right? When you evaluate a guy, I know this sounds stupid. How do you know if a guy fits your scheme or not without evaluating him? You're evaluating everybody. It's like, I don't know if your math teachers ever did this growing up, Brian, but I remember I had a math teacher who, like, every once in a while on a test would be like, okay, we would do like those, whatever it was, like the time test. It was like 20 math problems. You had to get like a minute or something.
Oh, like the boxes.
And it would be like, all right, you only have to answer the ones that ended in even, where the answer is an even number, which in my stupid little elementary school mind, I'm like, great, I only have to answer all the questions. How do you find out if they end an even number or not? You got to solve
the
it.
answer. Yeah.
So at this point, you're scouting everybody. They should be scouting everybody. They should be evaluating everybody. And whether or not they're a fit is part of the evaluation. But the reality is when you watch a guy, okay, this guy's a better fit for Shanahan than he is for this, or he's a better fit for this than he is for this. And then when the coach comes in and he talks to the scouts, he says, all right, well, who did you like for this kind of role? And the scouts, hopefully having watched everybody, say, these are the guys. So I would not, it's a fair question. I would not worry about them not having an offensive coordinator right now. Again, if we get to the combine and they don't have an offensive coordinator
issue,
we'll have pulled the fire alarm well beyond that. Again, by the Super Bowl is like the absolute latest cutoff. I'll start being a little worried at the beginning of the week next week if they don't have somebody. I'll be deep down hoping it's because they're hiring somebody from the Niners. If the Super Bowl ends and they don't make a hire, that is when we truly panic and say they don't know what they're doing. And I'll add this too. Personnel dictates scheme. So especially where they're at on the offensive side of the ball, you just need talent. You get your talent, get your cornerstone players, and you build the offense around that. So they need to be there looking for who is good, for lack of a better term, who's good. And probably not for the third pick. None of those guys are there. May, Daniels, Harrison, all, but 34 or 35, or no, it's 34, 68. If they want to move around the board for guys, end of the first round, maybe trade back up. They're just looking for who's in that range and who do they like, who's a good player. The offensive coordinator is not going to be drafting the players for them.
Yep. Agree. And there are a lot of good players down there at the Senior Bowl in that range. So that's good transition to start to talk about some of those guys. But before we do that, let's take a very quick break and we will hear from our friends over at FanDuel.
All right.
Super Bowl to all who celebrate from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. FanDuel has so many ways for you to end the season with a W. Not only can you bet on who will win Super Bowl 58, but FanDuel also has bets. Which players will score a touchdown? How many points will be scored? And so much more. New customers join today and you get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Just visit FanDuel.com/Boston to sign up. That's FanDuel.com/Boston. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
All right, so Alex, I guess your Twitter feed today was full of hand length and arm length and all these measurements. It was
that
glorious.
Time of year, baby.
We're so back because the Senior Bowl, they started releasing all these measurements. They have the guys down there. Practices start tomorrow. I believe it's Tuesday through Thursday practices, and then the game is Saturday, which you can watch on NFL Network. But you mentioned it, like not these top guys who we're going to see at 3 overall. None of the top 3 quarterbacks are there. Marvin Harrison, Joe Alt, those guys aren't there. But there's a lot of good offensive tackles. There's a lot of good wide receivers that will be right in that 2nd to 3rd range for the Patriots. But there are a couple quarterbacks who could be in that range at 34 if they go elsewhere in the first round, and it's Michael Penix and Bo Nix. Those are the 2 big guys. Maybe one of them, a good week here could push them into the first round. I know Dane Brugler from The Athletic was saying like Bo Nix could generate some top 10 hype with a good week down there in Mobile, which I agree. I don't really see that, but those are like the 2 big fishes at the quarterback spot. So what do you... We've talked about them a lot throughout the year. So what do you kind of want to see from them, throughout this week at the Senior Bowl?
Yeah, I think with Penix, the hand size, that was a good start because he's a little on the shorter side. So, you wonder hand size, arm length. He checked all those boxes. Good shape there. You just want to see a good, solid performance. He can't answer the questions about pressure, which are going to be one of the biggest play style questions for him after that national championship game. But just seeing how he looks throwing the ball, I think is he can kind of help remind people just how talented he is with his arm after that bad performance against Michigan. And it's also a big week for him because he's going to talk to teams and they're going to ask him about his knees and they're going to ask him about his shoulders. And I don't think you can do medical workups, but you can, ask questions about it. Certainly. So I think checking with teams in that sense, it's a big week for him. For Bo Nix, it's tough because he has 61 college starts under his belt. That's a record. Like you should more or less know who Bo Nix is at this point. He's also played in 2 very different offensive systems. So you've seen him in some different ways. I'd like to see him throw the ball down the field consistently, especially to the middle of the field. He didn't do a ton of that at Oregon. But I feel like for him, he'll interview well. You know, he's a smart kid. I think he really understands his story, and I think he's made the most of the career that he's had, which is not gone the way it was expected to. There's a great piece if you go on YouTube after the show and look up. Marty Smith from ESPN did a great piece on Bo Nix and going from Oregon, where his dad played and was a hero, to kind of bottoming out there, going to Oregon. Did I say going to Auburn, where his dad played? His dad was a hero there, bottomed out at Auburn, went to Oregon, obviously had success. He's going to interview well. He's going to play up his story that, you know, he's resilient and all that. So I don't want to say it's a layup week for Bo Nix. You know, he's still got to go out there and perform. He can't put up a stinker, but I think we all more or less know who Bo Nix is at this point. And it's just going to be teams kind of checking in with him and seeing if the guy he's put out there outwardly is who he really is.
Yep. That is the one thing though, like pushing the ball like vertically down the field in those practices, if he gets a chance to kind of do that, because I mean, we've talked about like the average depth of target at Oregon was like
6 yards.
It was like 93rd out of like 95 eligible quarterbacks or something insane like that. Like that was his kind of game, those short passes.
But I would also say, like, if that's what you're not drafting Bo Nix being like, all right, we're going to draft him and turn him into a deep ball thrower. Like, you know what you want. You know what you're getting in Bo Nix. You know what you want. A team, honestly, the 49ers grabbing him at the end of the first round, if they're worried about Purdy or they don't want to pay him, makes all the sense in the world. He would be excellent in that offense.
Yeah.
But yeah, if he starts chucking the ball down the field and shows some really good consistent accuracy down the field, then okay, maybe he bumps up a little bit. I don't think he's getting into the top 10. Does he maybe sneak into the top half of the first round, top 16? Yeah, that's probably about his ceiling. There's going to be a group of teams, I think it's like 7 to 12, where all but one of those teams are like obvious quarterback teams. Maybe he sneaks up in there. But yeah, I don't, relatively speaking, again, he can't just olay and pass on this week and show up and do nothing. But relatively speaking, this is not a massive week for Bo Nix. Like, he's pretty solidified, I think, in his draft stock.
Yep. I don't mind Bo Nix. He's got some nice things working for him, but it's still, I think they should shoot higher, and just the Auburn stuff still terrifies me. Like, I feel like he might just get back to the league and revert back to Auburn Bo Nix, which is just a scary kind of thought.
He's fine, but I'm okay. Yeah, I'm okay letting some other team figure out Bo Nix. If Bo Nix ends up great and the Patriots pass on Bo Nix and he ends up being good, I can live with that. They're just not a spot for him right now. It doesn't make sense.
Yep. But some other quarterbacks down there.
Yes.
Some middle round guy. We'll get to your guy in a second, but some of the two like middle round guys, maybe day 2, Michael Pratt from Tulane and Spencer Rattler from South Carolina. You intrigued by any of those guys? You know, Rattler was like a projected top NFL pick back in his early Oklahoma days. Obviously hasn't gone great for him, but he's got a lot of arm talent. And then Michael Pratt is more of that kind of a traditional passer, like accurate over the middle of the field. It's got a little athleticism, but nothing that's really going to blow you away. So are any of those guys kind of intriguing you maybe for a day 2 pick there?
I mean, Michael Pratt to me is Bailey Zappi. He's low end starter, high end backup, accurate, quick passer, can move around a little bit, but he's not overly athletic. He's not going to be able to drive the ball down the field. He doesn't have that upper echelon arm strength. Very similar play, small school too, multi-year starter. Like, I think they're very similar players. If they're going to move on from Mac and Zappi and they want to do the RG3 Kirk Cousins thing, bringing in Michael Pratt to back up a guy like Drake May makes sense. I don't know that I'm drafting Michael Pratt as the next guy, but good, interesting backup. Spencer Rattler is a fascinating project to me. He was one of these guys coming out of high school that was like next. He was the number 1 quarterback in his class, number 2 recruit overall, 5-star, 99 rating on 24/7. He was the Elite 11 MVP his year. He's in that QB documentary on Netflix, but So he was supposed to be Caleb Williams. Like, he went to Oklahoma. He was he was okay his first year, but then going into 22, he was supposed to take, or going into 21, sorry, he was supposed to take over the starting job. He was the preseason Heisman favorite, loses the job halfway through the year to Caleb Williams. So he's similar kind of player, all of it. So washes out at Oklahoma, transfers to South Carolina, had a rough year in 22, bounced back this year. He's never lived up to the hype that, he had. I mean, he was supposed to be a guy that was going to be a first overall pick and was going to be a generational prospect, franchise quarterback. He obviously never got there. The talent is there. He is still very reckless, and there are legitimate character concerns with him. And it's an interesting thing where we know more about him as a person because he's been featured in some of these documentaries. You go back, you watch that Netflix documentary, he does not come across well. He does not come across as a good leader, a good teammate. Now, I don't want to punch down at the kid for what he did when he was 18. That was 4 years ago. And I certainly think he's learned, but that's going to be something he gets asked a lot about. So, ton of natural talent. And I think, I wouldn't be surprised if a team looks at him and says, yeah, we can tap into what, why am I blanking on his name? The coach, Oklahoma, USC.
Oh, now I'm blanking on his name.
Wow. This is embarrassing.
I know. All I can think of is Bob Stoops.
I know. All I can think of is Cliff Kingsbury. Lincoln Riley. Jeez.
Lincoln, there you go. That was a bad one.
Yeah, sorry for that. Anyway, I can see a team looking and saying, we can tap into what Lincoln Riley couldn't. We can kind of, keep this upwards trajectory that he was on at South Carolina. We can keep that going. If you're the Patriots, it's a tough sell. It's a tough sell. Or, how's he going to handle being a backup? You put him behind Mac Jones. That's more a team that has a year to kind of see where he's at. But, if they took him in like the 5th round and said, we're just going to kind of see what's there, it would make sense to me. Again, I think you need, we've talked about, people have talked about, all right, you get a guy on day 2 and then a bridge guy, right? You get JJ McCarthy and a bridge guy. It's not really a bridge guy with Rattler, because the idea is, say you go JJ McCarthy and like Jacoby Brissett, right? McCarthy's still your franchise quarterback. He's still taking over. The plan is to hand him the keys, and you're drafting him with the idea that he will be ready at some point. That's not the deal with Rattler. He's more of a lottery ticket. He's more of a project. He's just kind of, he doesn't necessarily solve. JJ McCarthy, you draft him with the idea that your quarterback problems are solved long-term. They're just not solved as shorter term as they would be with a guy like Drake May or Jaden Daniels, or even Michael Penix or Bo Nix. You don't guarantee you solve anything with Spencer Rattler. So you need another plan there. They could still bring him in and see what he's doing, but I wouldn't say that if it's him, Mac Jones, Bailey Zappi, they still don't have a long-term answer at quarterback.
Yeah, you don't want to bank on him.
Right. Maybe Rattler becomes something, but you don't go into the season feeling great. It's like, all right, this guy's here. It's interesting. I guess we'll watch him, but you don't feel great about the long-term direction at the position.
Yeah. You're drafting him then because the traits are like the arm talent is off the charts.
Right.
He can move around a little bit. You're drafting him and hoping those traits develop into a starting quarterback at some point down the line, but it's not like a Drake May or Caleb Williams where like this is our guy, or even JJ McCarthy. But really good arm talent. It's just the decision making, some of the aggressiveness with that arm talent. I think he had like 20 interceptions over the last 2 years. So and so watching like the decision making on the field this week and then how he interviews will be big with some of those maybe character concerns as well. But maybe the most fun quarterback down there in Mobile.
Yeah, I think there's three. I think there's 3 early to mid day 3 guys. I think you're short selling my guy, but go ahead.
Okay. I think he could be a early day 3 pick, but Bazooka Joe Milton down there in Tennessee just has a rocket of an arm. We need like how the NHL does like the hardest shot, slap shot. We need like a just hardest pass at the combine just to see how fast Joe Milton can throw a football. But he's got a rocket, but accuracy issues, some tempo when he doesn't need to throw it 100 miles an hour,
Right.
but maybe still does throw it 100 miles an hour. But he's got a monster arm on him, Joe
And it's
Milton.
not just that he can throw it hard. There's video of him throwing the ball 60
Hard.
yards from his knees. Like it's funny. You read the scouting reports about him, and I tend to agree. There's nothing he's doing mechanically. His mechanics aren't good. They're not good. They're not consistent. Like, he shouldn't be throwing the ball this far. It doesn't make sense. It can't be explained. Like, I'm sure he'll be asked about it, but he just kind of does it. You watch, it seems the way he decides how far he throws the ball isn't by changing literally how hard he throws it. He changes his mechanics. So it's not, all right, I need to go 80%. I need to go 60% with the arm. It's, all right, I'm going to fade away a little bit on this one to take a little bit off. But it works. It's weird. Like, that shouldn't work, but it works. And then honestly, he's kind of the same way as a runner. He's not great on designed runs. Like, he's not great on read options. He doesn't really get going when you do the designed quarterback runs. But when he tucks and scrambles, he's a tank.
Big guy.
Nobody can tackle him. There's a play against Virginia from this year where he's simultaneously stiff-arming one defender, like successfully, stiff-arms one defender while trucking another. He's 6'5", 235. He's pure chaos. He's pure recklessness. He's the most entertaining player in this draft. Entertaining does not mean good. It's a different thing. I am fascinated by Joe Milton. I am beyond fascinated by Joe Milton. I have no idea what the NFL is going to make of him, but I do really think some teams are going to love him because they're going to see 6'5", 235, can create with his legs, can throw the ball 80 yards, not an exaggeration, can throw the ball 80 yards, like in pads. And they're going to say, yeah, we'll put it together. There's Jamarcus Russell and Josh Allen, and he's going to be one or the other. I don't know that there's any in between with him, right? It's probably more likely one than the other, but he's fascinating. And to talk about the Kirk Cousins thing, if you draft a guy like Jaden Daniels or Drake May, and skill set wise, not talent wise, but skill set wise, he is somewhere in between Drake May and Jaden Daniels. He's a little bit of both. So you could pair him with either guy, and I think he could run to the best he can run either offense. And you could essentially have him as a package player where he's going to throw Hail Marys. And by the way, you're throwing Hail Marys from the -40 if you have Joe Milton. Like, that end of half, yeah. He can throw Hail Marys.
We'll never have to ask, why didn't you throw a Hail Mary at the end of the half again?
Or we'll be asking it a lot more. You have Joe Milton. Why didn't you throw a Hail Mary? He can be your Hail Mary quarterback. He'd be a pretty good tush-push quarterback, just with his size and his lower body strength. He can run a little bit. You'll put him in some packages where, I said he's not great at read option stuff. Maybe you coach him on that. And then you also have him as a developmental quarterback, like Taysom Hill if he wasn't playing tight end, basically. Like, you could use him in that way. I don't know that it's ultimately the team that drafts him will. I would. But he's a really fascinating. And look, he might go out this week and suck. There's a very real chance that happens. But it's not necessarily about that, because you put on the tape, there's some unbelievable throws. There's some throws you watch where you laugh your ass off how great they are. And then there's some throws you watch where you laugh your ass off because you have no idea what the hell he's trying to do. There's a play, I got to find the video of it, where like he's trying to hit a guy on a crosser in the back of the end zone in the red zone, and he drills a guy in the third row. But there's another throw where he puts the ball, flick of his wrist, 75 yards on a dime to a streaking receiver. So I don't know what's going to happen with him. I really don't. He's very hard to project, but he's going to be. It's going to be fun with him in the process. And again, he might suck this week. He might be great this week. It doesn't change how I feel about him. He's interesting. I would not give him the keys to the franchise. Again, like I said with Rattler, like you draft him, I don't think your quarterback questions are answered. But I'd love to bring him in the building and just see what's going on there. Just open up the hood and see what's going on under the hood, because Brian, you're going to hear me say this a lot. This is something I fall back on every draft process. There are certain players people really like who are very good players, but I don't want to say people overrate in the sense of how good they are. I'm trying to remember who one of these guys was last year. Okay, like Michael Mayer last year was one of these guys. And this isn't a perfect example because Brock Bowers is so good. All right, okay, Zay Flowers is actually a great example of this because he just had, a big game. People loved Zay Flowers last year, and rightfully so. He's a really good player. But that skill set, that kind of player, like you can get Zay Flowers most years, right? Like Xavier Worthy's a very similar player this year. And that doesn't mean Zay Flowers isn't good. It's just there's only so many skill sets you can have on a football field, and some are bound to overlap. So there's a lot of guys, even if they're good, if you need that skill set, you'll have another chance to get that skill set. There's a handful of guys. So Tariq Woolen was a guy like this for me. DeJuan Jones was a guy like this for me last year, right? The 680-pound tackle from Ohio State. You're not going to be able to draft DeJuan Jones every year. You want that guy. You want the 680-pound tackle with basketball feet. You want the 6'3", 210-pound corner with the plus wingspan who runs a 4.3 40 and is a converted receiver. You got to draft that guy because you're not getting that guy again. Like, you don't have another chance to draft a player with that makeup. Joe Milton's that guy. Like, you want the guy that can throw the ball 80 yards with a flick of his wrist, regardless of his other flaws. You got to draft him right now because you're not getting Joe Milton again. I've seen some people compare him to Anthony Richardson. Sort of. The arm strength's different. The arm strength's different than anybody. Than Caleb Williams, than Josh Allen, than Patrick Mahomes. Just the pure ability to throw a football distance. We haven't seen it. We haven't seen it in a long time. So that's just, I'll end my Joe Milton rant there, but he's different. He's different. It doesn't mean he's good. I mean, but he's different.
He threw an orange like 120 yards, didn't he?
Yeah.
That's a great video. He just launches a full orange, the whole football field length. He's very entertaining.
Like, again, am I going to give Joe Milton the keys to franchise? No. Would I love to watch Joe Milton in the preseason 3 games a year for 4 years? 100%. Absolutely. Are you kidding me? That would be great.
Yep.
So that's the Joe Milton spiel.
It'll be interesting to see how the NFL world kind of looks at him throughout this whole
I have I think there's going to be a couple teams that like him, and I think there's going to be a couple teams that have him off their board altogether. He's going to be a very polarizing prospect.
Yep. But Mitch said he's going to go watch some Milton highlights. They're very entertaining. They are very entertaining. That's the perfect word to use for Joe Milton. But I guess the last quarterback who's on the complete opposite end of the spectrum is Sam Hartman. Earlier in the year, I think I said I expect the Patriots to take Sam Hartman, but that was when a world where Bill Belichick was still here. But he's more of like your Mac Jones. I think he's a 6-year senior, a lot of experience at the collegiate level. He's just, he's not going to wow you with any of his physical traits, but he's pretty accurate, and that's what you're going to get. Just the opposite player of Joe Milton, and I don't know, someone who doesn't really need to be on the Pats' radar here, but he's probably the 6th best quarterback down there this week.
Yeah, I'm sorry. You said Sam Hartman. You kind of cut out there at the beginning.
Yeah.
Hartman. Yeah, I'm good on Sam Hartman's college quarterback, and he was a good college quarterback, and great. He's a college quarterback. You throw him in that like Ian Book, Sam Ehlinger tier, where like he made a chance to start just because like he's a smart guy and he's experienced, and teams will keep him around. He'll hang around on practice squads and scout teams for 5-6 years at least, but you're not talking about him as like a serious guy that's going to start and win games.
Agree with you there. So those are the top quarterbacks. Let's we can transition to receivers because there are a ton of guys who again are in that kind of 2nd to 3rd range picks for the Patriots. There's no Marvin Harrison. There's no the Texas guys aren't there. Malik Neighbors, not those guys, but there are a lot of talented options. Xavier Legette, is that how you say his last name? Or Legette?
Legette.
He's been a guy who seems to has a lot of steam kind of picking up the last few days, even though we just measured in at 6'1", which was 2 inches less than he was listed at South Carolina. We got like Roman Wilson, Ladd McConkey, kind of similar build, just really tough covers, even though a little bit undersized. Tez Walker, UNC, Ricky Pearsall, I really like him from Florida. Malachi Corley, Western Kentucky. And the list goes on and on and on. A ton of really good, really talented wide receivers down there at the Senior Bowl this year.
Yeah, it's really an unbelievable group. And again, a reminder that Marvin Harrison Jr. is not the only receiver in this draft. And you're talking about, I said this on, I did manage to do Catch 22 with my broken voice last week. There's multiple future Pro Bowlers in this group. I truly believe that. And a lot of what this event is sorting out the board, right? Xavier Legette, Tez Walker, Johnny Wilson, Ricky Pearsall. I don't feel great about, and I just read those guys off the top of my head. I don't have like a strong feeling about the order. Who would I prefer to who? This is a great week to see these guys side by side in the same setting against the same competition and kind of sort that group out. But it's a great group of receivers. I also think it's a very diverse group in the sense that you want a true X outside receiver, Leggett, Walker, Wilson. You want kind of a move receiver, combo guy, Ladd McConkey, Ricky Pearsall, Brendan Rice. You want a slot receiver, Jacob Cowing, Malachi Corley. There's all these different guys with all these different skill sets. It's such a good group. I really hope, as somebody who wants to see the Patriots go quarterback at 3, I really hope somebody in this group becomes a Patriot. I think somebody in this group should become a Patriot. And look, you still got to find the right guy. They won't all hit. But it's a great week to kind of narrow down this group and see who are your guys within that day 2, day 3 wide receiver range.
Is there one, like, before we kick off these practices here, is there like 1 or 2 that you may have a little higher than everyone else there that you, based off your work so far in this process, that you really like out of that group?
I don't know about higher than everybody. Like, I think Leggett and Tez Walker are legit. Like, those guys are, day 2 top 50 receivers, real winners at the X position. They interest me. I'm super interested in Johnny Wilson. Honestly, Johnny Wilson's kind of the wide receiver
He
version
might
of
play some
Joe
tight
Milton.
end this week. I think I read that somewhere.
So so here's what's interesting. He's 6'7", 235, which I believe. Supposedly in high school, he ran a 4.3.
Damn.
Not a 4.3 flat, but like in the 4.3s, right? So it's like, this is another guy where, again, if he gets, I'll even bump it up to 4.4. If he gets the combine, he's running a 4.4 in that range. You're not going to get guys like that. Guy doesn't come along every year. In terms of his skill set, he does a lot of things well. The one thing he's not good at is he can't catch the ball. And let me revise that. He's really good at contested catches. When he's open, it just clangs off his hands. I don't know what the hell that is. I'd love to be down there this week to ask him about it. And that is something that can be coached. He just has really bad focus drops. If you can get him to figure that out and the rest is as advertised, that size, that speed, I mean, you're going to start getting into like the AJ Brown, DK Metcalf kind of comps with him. So let's see if he can catch the ball this week, I think would be my big thing with him. I like Ricky Pearsall. I think he slept on just because Florida wasn't very good this year. I love the motor and the energy he plays with. He plays wide receiver like you'd think a linebacker or a safety, like a guy like Ed Reed, right? Or Brian Dawkins would play the wide receiver position.
Too. He's got great hand.
Yeah, great catch radius, spectacular catch guy, pretty good route runner, decent size. He's very interesting to me. And then I'll even go further down. I see a lot of people in the chat talking about Malachi Corley. I do like Malachi Corley. I don't know that slot receiver on day 2, especially high on day 2, where you're probably going to have to take Corley. I don't love that. If they want to like hedge their bets with another Demario Douglas type, Aeneas Smith from Texas A&M is a player I really like. Jacob Cowing from Arizona. That guy just gets open and catches footballs. I think he had 112 catches last year or something like that. Like, he's tiny. And that's going to be, I actually meant to look up today what he weighed in at, because I don't think it's going to be big, and just hang with me here so I can find it. But he gets open, he separates, and he's just consistently catches the football. So I want to find the measurements because I'm going to give the measurables, and everybody's going to say, never mind, I'm out on Jacob Cowing.
People were talking about him like he's going to go on this Tank Dell run during the Senior Bowl this week and kind of boost it.
He's a different kind of player. Like, he's more Tank Dell's fast, right? Yeah. I would say that a guy like Cowing is more quick than fast. Like, it's more short area quickness. It's more pure route running, things like that. Why won't this look?
I got his card. He was 5'8", 165.
Yeah. Okay. So that's small. and Devin Tompkins in Tampa comes to mind, but Devin Tompkins, I think, ran a 4.3. So I don't think Cowing's going to come in that fast, but he could be, if you find the right role for him on day 3, he could be a guy. So yeah, Devin Tompkins is 5'8", 154.
Oh my gosh.
But he ran a 4.4. So like, yeah, I remember that when he came out in the draft. I think that was 2 years ago. 2 years ago out of Utah State. I remember saying, like, I was a big Devin Tompkins guy because he was so good down the field, and his ability to track the ball down the field was excellent and is excellent. He's made some plays for Tampa, but I remember saying that any coach that sends Devin Tompkins over the middle of the field should be tried for attempted murder, or at least attempted manslaughter. It's gonna kind of be the same thing with Jacob Cowing, except he's not a deep ball receiver. He's a true slot Edelman Welker kind of guy, but that means taking a beating. And taking a beating at that size, you're asking a lot. So it's going to be really interesting to see how teams view him.
Yep. He was.
And yeah, the weigh-in was a big part of this week for him. And you said it was 5'8", 165.
Yeah.
We'll see if he bulks up at it would not be surprising. And Tank Dell did this last year. If he's a little more bulked up at the combine, because teams are going to see that 165 and they're going to have real questions about his durability. Like Tompkins, I think Tompkins went undrafted. And that's the kind of guy you're talking about here. Tank Dell was just for the sake of being complete. Because Tank Dell also had some questions about his size. He's 5'10", 165. So he was at least a little bit taller. And again, he had more of that straight line speed. But that's a big part of the reason Tank Dell fell. He went all the way, I think the third round, right? Yeah, he was early in the third round. He ran a 4.49. But I think teams were worried about his size. And it's going to be a similar issue for Cowing. But tremendously talented football player.
Yep. Really good. Any thoughts on Christian's brother, Luke, from Rice?
I honestly haven't watched him a ton. It's tough watching Rice football, man. It's tough. I was going to kind of let this week be my intro to him. He's a McCaffrey. His brother's a hell of a player. His dad was a hell of a player. Let's see. I think anybody with that last name you're going to look at a little bit more close, right? So we'll see what he does this week. Not one of the guys I'm super familiar with. I thought he was going to go back to school. I remember seeing something late or like midway through the season that he wasn't a draft prospect. So I kind of looked to the other side. I wasn't looking at him as much, but now I'm in. This is kind of the time of year that I catch up on those guys.
Yeah. I read a few reports on him, and it was the consensus was kind of like he's not going to blow you away with any of these athletic traits, but he's just a damn good football player, right? Like he's a McCaffrey. He's a good football player. And another family connection, Rice, Jerry Rice's son, USC, Caleb Williams is top target. He'll be down there. So a lot of really good wide receivers, and it'll be fun to watch them. They get the one-on-ones during practice, and we'll get a good sense on all those guys. Also a really talented offensive tackle class, and a lot of those guys that might be, again, right in that kind of range, right around that 34th overall pick. And I can't pronounce any of their names except Patrick Paul and Jordan Morgan. But
they're testing us with these names.
A lot of tough names. Fuagi from Oregon State. Tyler Guyton from Oklahoma is like a really athletic guy. Kingsley from BYU is another one of those kind of, I think he made the freaks list in the preseason. So a lot of just like really physical, athletic kind of freaks at that tackle spot. I did see Troy Fatanu from Washington just got removed from the Senior Bowl, so we won't see him this week. Yeah, Dane Brugler 10 minutes ago put out a list of 6 guys who aren't going to be there anymore. Fatanu is there. It's Jalen Wright, the Tennessee running back. Troy Fatanu.
Oh, I like him too.
Yeah, me too. Cooper Beebe, offensive lineman from Kansas State.
He doesn't need to be there. He's a good player.
Cedric Van Pran, center from Georgia. Michael Barrett, linebacker from Michigan. And Mike Sanristil, the Michigan defense back. Is that how you say his last name?
I think he pulled out Sanristil. I think he pulled out I don't think that's new.
Okay.
Because when I was doing my prep, he wasn't on the roster for me, so.
Okay, so he won't be there. But, yeah, Fatanu was one of these offensive tackle prospects. Would have been nice to see him measure in because a lot of people think he's going to be a guard at the next level. But a lot of these, again, really athletic, really talented guys right in that early second round, maybe late first round. You might have to trade up for some of them. But in that range for an offensive tackle for the Patriots.
Yeah, so there's 7 guys expected to go between 20 and 50. I guess now 5 of them. It was 6. 5 of the 7 will be at the Senior Bowl, and the Senior Bowl defensive line group is amazing. So these guys are really going to be tested. And this is where, if you're the Patriots trading back into the end of the first round or at 34, this is the prime spot to take a tackle. So I like Patrick Paul from Houston's a guy I really like. Jordan Morgan from Arizona, I really like. Tyler Guyton from Oklahoma is an interesting prospect. Again, like I talked about with the receivers, there's not a ton of consensus, and it's hard to say at this point, sorting that group out. That's what we're going to do this week is sort that group out.
Yep. But it is like, I would say you're better off taking a tackle at that 34 spot because it's a little more, there's a lot of these guys, but it's a little more top heavy. And then with all those receivers, they might fall down the board a little bit more to
that receiver group, right, is that we talked about before is kind of 40 to 80, which is the second round and most of the third. The tackle group, the second tier tackle group is all projected between 20 and 50. And it's less players. So if you're waiting, you can afford to wait on a receiver more than anything else just based on the depth of the class.
Yep. But I mean, it's a good draft if you have to go quarterback, tackle, wide receiver, it is a good draft to have to do that because you can get some talent at all three spots at all three picks there.
Yeah.
But I mean, those are the big three spots. Obviously, we've all been paying attention to, and Gerard Mayo even told us those are their three biggest positions of needs. But like just going through the rest of the rosters, any other prospects kind of catching your eye, or that you're a little excited to watch throughout the week here?
Well, I know. I mean, I've gotten a ton of questions on Dylan Lobb from UNH.
Fun player.
Yeah, so he's the running back. You put on the tape, and he looks like Christian McCaffrey, but he's doing that at the FCS level. He's doing that at UNH and the CAA. Can he do it in the NFL? And can he do it against NFL talent? And this week is he's going to be going against guys from the SEC. He's going to be going against guys from the Big Ten. Can he make an SEC league safety missing coverage? Can he block a Big 10, a Big 12 pass rusher? He is generally, so I said a lot of this guy's draft stock is more or less settled. It's kind of sorting within the tiers. You don't have too much of guys jumping tiers at the Senior Bowl. A small school guy like Lobb, his draft stock's going to be very predicated on what happens this week. This is a big week for him. There's some other running backs. I'm just getting my preview up here, which will be up tomorrow on 985sportshub.com. Cody Schrader from Missouri is another player who could handle that maybe passing down back role. Interesting story, was his D2 standout, went to Missouri, became a big part of their identity as they kind of had a resurgence here the last couple of years. Decent tight end group, I would say the Senior Bowl. Jatavian Sanders at the Shrine Bowl. He's the second tight end after Brock Bowers. I really like him. I do. But you're getting a good look at different types of tight ends in this class. Like if they want the big traditional tight end, Brevin Spanford from Minnesota is a guy I really like. You talk about rare size, 6'7", 270, but he can move a little bit. So he's an interesting player. Jared Wiley of TCU is another guy I like. I think he's had a good couple of years, If they want that move tight end, I know a lot of people are familiar with Ben Sinnott. And if they're going to run a West Coast thing and they want their Kyle Juszczyk.
Kyle Juszczyk, exactly.
And then there's Jaheim Bell, who's more of like a hybrid tight end receiver, like tight end slot receiver kind of guy. He could be another shot at Jonnu Smith, to use that guy correctly, who, by the way, had a good year in Atlanta. So those guys are interesting. On the defensive side of the ball, I know nobody really wants to hear about the defensive side of the ball. The defensive tackle class is super fun, except all the fun guys are going high. McKinley Jackson from A&M is probably the closest they get. It is a good group of corners, and they do need another boundary corner. Chris Abrams-Drain is a guy I really liked for them last year as a sleeper. Now he went back to school and improved his stock. Missouri, 6'11", he's 195. So he's kind of a tweener. He can play both spots. He has played both spots. He's a converted receiver. So he started playing receiver a couple of years ago. And if you remember when we talked about Tariq Woolen a couple of years ago, I'm a big fan of that because I think those guys, and you see it in Abrams-Drain and the way he plays, so good at catch point, so good at tracking the ball, so good down the field because they have those wide receiver instincts. Now, the rest of his game's still raw, but he's a good athlete. Again, he's got that multi-positional experience that I like. He's got decent size. As a third rotational corner, as a developmental player, he's really interesting. And then Max Melton from Rutgers, another day 3 corner I like. Just really good on-ball production. doesn't get beat at the catch point. Also excellent on special teams. He blocked 4 punts in 2022, has some return experience as well. So as they need to kind of, everybody's rolling their eyes, oh, special teams guy. You're taking him later in the draft. He's also a developmental defensive player. Somebody's got to play in the kicking game. Like you need players to play there. And then at safety, Cameron Kitchens, if they had their stuff together and they were picking in the 20s, we would be talking about Cameron Kitchens as a Devin McCourty replacement, and that would be every mock draft, and it would be great. And he's an awesome player. They can't take Cameron Kitchens in the first round. They just can't do it. They can't afford to do it. So you go down late day 2, maybe in the 3rd round, maybe you trade up, so you make the pick at 68 and then you trade back up into the top 100, somewhere in the 80s. Javon Bullard, who's Georgia's free safety this year, is a player I really like for them. And Seon Vaki from Utah, who plays free safety, slot corner, and running back. And he's going to be a late day 3 pick, is interesting. And then we can get to special teams, Brian, but I know I just rattled off a bunch of names, so I'll let you react.
Yeah, no, you hit a lot of them. Bullard he seems like one of the more free safety types in this class. So if they want to transition back to, having a true like rangy guy back there, Bullard would be a good fit. I like Bo Braid from Maryland. He's one of those more box safeties, but he just kind of plays with his hair on fire. Kyrie Jackson from Oregon is just like a lengthy, I think he measured in at like 6'3" with really long arms. Long Oregon cornerbacks seem to work pretty well. So that'd be interesting, but he could be like back into that round 3. So maybe too early to go for a corner. Cam Hart from Notre Dame is just kind of like a freak athlete at the corner spot. Back to offense. I like, Jalen Wright. Unfortunately, he won't be there now, but Tennessee running back, he's a home run threat anytime he touches the ball. And then you hit on Lobby, Jaheim Bell.
Is it Lob or Lobby?
I think it's Lob B.
Okay. I thought I know somebody else with that. When I used to do play-by-play, I remember that name coming up, and in that instance, it was Lob. So that's what I'm going off of. His family might pronounce it differently. We'll find out this week.
I watched one highlight, actual highlight with the commentary, and I think they said Lobby. So that's just.
See, I did that, and I must have found a different highlight because they said Lob. We'll find out. That's almost always the first question with these guys.
How do you say your name?
Will you say your name for us? Yeah. So, and at the tackles too, you're gonna need that with the tackles.
Yeah, absolutely at that spot. But Jaheim Bell, Ben Sinnott. Sinnott, you'd nail it. Like I first went to Kyle Juszczyk, especially if they're going to that type of offense. And AJ Barner from Michigan, another tight end.
They churn him out. It's tough because every time I watch him, I just see who's their other tight end who's going to be eligible next year.
I forget his name, but he's awesome. But he's like Barner's a good run blocker.
Yeah, I'm just like, why can't you be Colston Loveland?
He's a good run blocker, obviously coming from Michigan, but it's just like it's a run first offense, so you don't get many opportunities. So it'd be nice to see what he can do, maybe with some more chances in the passing attack. That'll be fun to watch. But a lot of names there, but some intriguing guys. But Torrey Taylor, punter, Iowa.
Yeah,
I'm not ready. I'm not moving off Bryce Behringer all of a sudden here, but we got to just watch Torrey Taylor this week and watch him hopefully hit bombs because he's awesome.
I was in your spot, obviously, when they drafted Jake Bailey, and I was the big punter guy, and there were more punters coming out that I liked. Obviously, you don't talk about him. Torrey Taylor's 6'4", 232. He's one of the biggest players he's built like a linebacker, and he rocks the crap out of the ball. It is set like every NCAA record. Dude rules. Dude just freaking rules. Enjoy him. Doesn't mean the Patriots should draft him. Enjoy him.
He's just fun.
You into either of the kickers? It's Will Reichert, who I like from Alabama, and Joshua Carty from Stanford, who I'm not as familiar with.
Yeah. I'm not that familiar with the Stanford kid. We obviously know the Alabama kicker. We've seen him a lot. I don't think they're going to be in a position to draft a kicker again this year. So
I'm with you. They should bring in a kicker.
Yeah.
But free agency, UDFA. Honestly, Harrison Mevis is the more interesting one to me, the kicker from Missouri. They call him the thicker kicker because he's like 250 and he doesn't carry it like an athlete like Torrey Taylor does. He might be undrafted though, and you get him then. I would not draft another kicker, but it's that kind of thing where like you can't entirely rule it out. If they end up somehow they make a trade, they end up with a bunch of 7th round picks. Will Reichert's hanging around. You just grab him, so you don't have to negotiate for him as a UDFA. Because I do like Reichert. I think he's a good kicker.
Yep.
The interesting thing, and we may not get the answer on this year, under Belichick, they only drafted kickers with experience kicking in inclement weather in college, right? You had Ryland, who's at Maryland, and before that was at Eastern Michigan, where it's nasty. You had Moody was at Michigan. Rohrwasser was in Maryland. Before that, he was in Buffalo. Gostowski was in Memphis, where it does, late in the year, November, December, you're kicking in some crap. Vinatieri, even going back to him, North Dakota or South Dakota is one of them. They didn't draft guys from the South or guys that played in domes. So that would rule out Reichert. Stanford could go either way. Again, I don't know that we get the answer to that this year, whether that was a Belichick thing or whether that gets continued, but I don't think these guys would really qualify for that, which makes it interesting.
Yep. Yeah, I agree they have to add a kicker, but for competition in the offseason, but I just don't think you can use a draft pick unless you do trade back and you pick up a bunch of late round picks there. But
Right.
yeah, I don't think they're in a position there. What about any gunners you got your eye on?
I said, Max Melton.
Yeah.
Max Melton.
This is the 40-yard dash. This is what it was made for.
Right.
That's what we
People
get.
Apparently people are annoyed. I give that explanation every year, but every year somebody DMs me and says they learned something. And so you're going to keep hearing it.
There you go. All right. So I think unless any other last names you have to throw out, I think we hit on a lot of them there. And we can.
I mean, there's some other players like higher in the draft that'll just be fun to watch. Chris Braswell is an edge from Alabama. I like him. Probably not for the Patriots, but just you want to have fun watching. Quinion Mitchell is one of the more interesting players this week. He's currently projected to be a first-round pick. He has some variance. So
Toledo, right?
Toledo, right.
Yep.
So he's been a lockdown corner at Toledo for 2 years, but that's in the max. So kind of like we talked about with Lob, however we're pronouncing it right. Now, he wasn't at the FBS level, so it's not quite the jump, but seeing him go against guys like Tez Walker, Xavier Legette, Johnny Wilson, let's see. All right, this played in the MAC. Let's see how it plays with the big boys. And he's in it. I don't think, even if he struggles, I don't know that he struggles to the point where he's falling to where the Patriots would take a corner, but he's an interesting player. And again, the way this works for the Patriots with the picks they have, especially this year, and some of their specific needs, you want him, as a Patriots fan, you want him to be going in the 20s because maybe he bumps down one of those tackles, or maybe he bumps down one of those receivers from the late 20s into the early 30s and you can grab them. So the guys that are like fringe first rounders like that, you want them all to look good. And Quinion Mitchell's a guy that does have some range in terms of where he could go. His range is a little wider than the average player, and this will be a big week for him.
Yep. Last one I'll throw out is the Oregon center, Jackson Powers Johnson.
I love that guy. His name's a full sentence.
Yeah. Jackson Powers Johnson. He's a really talented center, but you're probably looking like a top 50 pick.
He could be a first round pick.
Even a late first round pick, and that's just probably not in the Patriots range right there for that center position. But he's a really good player, and he should have a good week down there at the Senior Bowl. But unfortunately, might not be the path they can go down. But I think that will do it. That is a lot of names in both the coaching search and the Senior Bowl rosters that we just ran through. But we should be back on Thursday.
Yep.
At the end of all these practices, we can break down some more of what happened throughout the week. But make sure you follow Alex on Twitter at @RealAlexBarth and go to 985thesportshub.com. You can read his Senior Bowl preview tomorrow, and you can follow me on Twitter at @IamBrianHines, and I'll also have a Senior Bowl preview up tomorrow and throughout the week at patspulpit.com, so you make sure you check that out as well. Thank you all, as always, for tuning in, and we will see you guys later this week.
Bye.